There is a detail in this case that almost no one is talking about clearly enough. And once you understand it, the way you see this entire investigation changes. It is not a theory. It is not speculation built on anonymous tips or tabloid reports. It is a piece of evidence so precise, so biologically intimate, and so impossible to fabricate that it has become the single most important thread the FBI is pulling on right now. A device no larger than a small matchbox, sealed inside the chest of an 84-year-old woman, was running in the dark on the night she disappeared. It recorded what her body went through. It stored what her heart experienced. And the data it collected, time-stamped to the second, has given federal investigators a window into the 41 minutes between the moment her front door camera went dark and the moment her signal vanished entirely. That device is her pacemaker. That data is what the FBI has been decoding. And what they found inside, it is the most disturbing, the most revealing, and potentially the most case-breaking evidence in the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She is the mother of Savannah Guthrie, the anchor of NBC's Today Show, and of her daughter Annie, who lives only a few miles from Nancy's home in the Catalina Foothills neighborhood of Tucson, Arizona. Nancy was last seen at her Catalina Foothills home on the evening of January 31st, 2026. A timeline released by the Pima County Sheriff's Department shows she had dinner with relatives that night and was dropped off at her home, with her garage door confirmed closed at approximately 9:50 in the evening. She was a woman of quiet routine. She tended her garden. She attended church services. By every account from those who knew her, she had built a full and ordinary life in that neighborhood over 5 decades. There was nothing about the night of January 31st that should have ended differently from any other. But it did. AOL. A doorbell camera at her home went offline at approximately 1:45 in the morning on February 1st. And shortly before 2:30 in the morning, Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker app indicated it had lost its connection. Those two facts, separated by roughly 41 minutes, form the outer boundaries of the most important window in this entire investigation. What happened inside those 41 minutes is what the pacemaker data has begun to answer. And the answers are not comfortable. ABC News. To understand why this evidence matters as much as it does, you have to understand what a modern implanted cardiac device actually does. Most people think of a pacemaker as a regulator, something that sends small electrical pulses to keep a heart beating in a normal rhythm. That is true, but that is only part of the story. Modern pacemakers are also continuous data recorders. Pacemaker telemetry data has been described by experts as an unbiased witness in cases like this. According to Morgan Wright, CEO and founder of the National Center for Open and Unsolved Cases, the pacemaker is the most unbiased witness we have because it's sending telemetry data. It generates all the additional events and actions that come from the behavior of that pacemaker. Every heartbeat is logged. Every arrhythmia is time-stamped. Every dramatic shift in heart rate, upward or downward, is captured with a precision that no human observer could replicate. And many modern devices contain accelerometers, sensors designed to detect physical movement, that can distinguish between a person walking under their own power and a person whose body is being moved by someone else. KWLD News 13. The FBI subpoenaed the relevant data from the device in the early days of February 2026, and what their forensic cardiac specialists found when they decoded that cloud record has formed the backbone of the federal investigation ever since. Let us walk through what the data actually shows, because the sequence matters. It matters enormously. ABC News. At 1:47 in the morning, the doorbell camera at Nancy's front door went offline. Footage recovered later showed what the FBI described as an armed individual appearing to have tampered with the camera at Nancy Guthrie's front door that morning. That figure, described by investigators as male, approximately 5 feet 9 to 5 feet 10 inches tall, with an average build, was dressed in dark clothing, wearing gloves, and carrying a backpack. The camera was disabled. The external visual record of that property went dark at that moment. And at that same moment, the pacemaker data shows something that the reference scripts authors and investigators themselves have described in the most careful terms. Nancy's heart rate spiked. Not gradually. Not the way a heart rate rises when someone slowly wakes from sleep. Sharply. Suddenly. The kind of physiological response that cardiologists associate with acute, conscious fear. With someone who is awake, who is aware, and who has just experienced something that terrified them. CBS News. The camera going dark and the cardiac spike are logged at the same moment. This is not a coincidence. These are two independent recording systems, one external, one biological, capturing the same event from different angles at the same second. Nancy Guthrie was awake. She was conscious, and something had frightened her severely enough that her body responded in a way that her own implanted device captured and stored. Her heart was the witness the cameras could no longer be. What makes the data more disturbing is what comes next. The elevated heart rate does not return to normal. In a typical startle response, a sudden noise or an unexpected sight causes a brief spike, and the heart returns to baseline within a few minutes once the cause is understood or removed. That is standard human physiology. That is not what Nancy's pacemaker recorded. The elevated, irregular rhythm persisted. It continued for an extended period within that 41-minute window. The cardiological interpretation of a sustained elevation like this, in the context of everything else the data shows, is that whatever triggered the initial fear response did not go away. It remained present. Nancy's body remained in a state of acute and sustained distress for an extended period of time. Then the movement data changes. Approximately 15 to 20 minutes into that window, the accelerometer readings shift. The pattern is no longer consistent with someone walking, moving voluntarily, directing their own body through space. It becomes passive. The movement is not self-generated. The rhythm, the character, the duration of what the accelerometer recorded in those minutes is consistent with a body being transported by someone else, with being carried, with being placed inside a vehicle. Think carefully about what that means. The device inside Nancy Guthrie's chest recorded the moment she was taken from her home. Not a camera, not a neighbor, not a passing car. The sensor sealed inside her own body captured that moment and stored it, time-stamped, in a cloud-based monitoring system that the FBI subpoenaed weeks before most of the public knew this case existed. And then, in the final portion of that 41-minute window, the data shows something that investigators have been most careful to discuss publicly, because what it describes changes the entire profile of whoever is responsible for what happened that night. The heart rate, which had remained elevated throughout most of the window, begins to shift again. The natural variation in the timing between heartbeats, something cardiologists call heart rate variability, begins to decrease. This is not a sign of cardiac arrest. It is not the pattern of a heart stopping. It is something more specific, and in this context, more alarming. Decreased heart rate variability of this pattern and character is clinically associated with the suppression of normal central nervous system regulation of the heart, with consciousness being altered, with someone having received a substance that affects their awareness. The data in those final minutes before the connection broke at 2:28 in the morning is consistent with the physiological signature of pharmacological sedation. Someone administered a sedative to an 84-year-old woman in the early hours of February 1st. That finding does not describe a person who acted impulsively. It does not describe a break-in that escalated out of control. You do not accidentally carry a medical-grade sedating agent in the dark at 2 in the morning. You obtain it deliberately. You transport it deliberately. You use it deliberately. The sedation finding, drawn from the biological record stored inside Nancy's own chest, tells investigators that this operation was planned. It was resourced, that someone thought through every step in advance, including what to do once they had her in a vehicle and needed to keep her controlled and quiet. The pacemaker data also resolves something that was widely misreported in the weeks following Nancy's disappearance. At 2:28 in the morning, Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker app indicated it was disconnected. Multiple outlets reported this as the pacemaker stopping, as the heart stopping. That is not what the data shows. The connection between the pacemaker and the home monitoring base unit, the device plugged into her bedroom wall that relayed her cardiac data to the cloud, was broken. The most probable explanation, given the accelerometer data showing sustained vehicle movement, is that Nancy had been transported far enough from her home that the Bluetooth signal between the device in her chest and the base unit on her nightstand could no longer reach. The pacemaker itself did not stop. Nancy Guthrie's heart did not stop. The data at 2:28 shows a sedated, functioning heart. The connection ended because the person inside whose chest the device was beating had been taken away. That distinction matters deeply because it means the internal memory of that pacemaker has continued logging data every moment since that connection broke. Every day, every hour. The complete physiological record of everything Nancy has experienced since that night is stored inside the device that is still working inside her. ABC News. The FBI deployed a specialized detection tool called a signal sniffer, which uses an amplifier and a directional antenna to detect specific Bluetooth signals and lock onto the unique identifier, or MAC address, of a specific device. According to Wright, it continuously scans, and if it doesn't recognize the target, it just eliminates it until it locks onto the right one. This signal sniffer was mounted on a helicopter flying slowly at low altitude over search corridors. The geographic area targeted for those sweeps was derived from the accelerometer data itself. If Nancy was placed in a vehicle at roughly the 15 to 20-minute mark inside that 41-minute window, and the connection broke at 2:28, that provides a travel time estimate. 15 to 20 minutes of driving south of the Catalina foothills places a vehicle somewhere between 12 and 25 miles from her home. That corridor, when mapped, runs directly along the highway heading south toward Rio Rico and the border region. The search zone is not a guess. It is a calculation drawn from the biological data stored inside Nancy Guthrie's own body. KWLD News 13 CBS News. Now, let us turn to the DNA, because this is where the investigation stands in the sharpest focus right now, and where the most consequential developments are unfolding. The physical evidence recovered at the scene includes a rootless hair sample and biological material from inside the home. A black glove found near Guthrie's home, which the FBI said appears to match the gloves worn by the subject in the surveillance video, also underwent DNA testing. A DNA profile of an unknown male was recovered from that glove and submitted to the National DNA Database. The result of that database check came back with no match. As the Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed, the DNA from the gloves produced no matches in CODIS, the National Criminal DNA Database. CBS News Yahoo. That detail is significant on its own. No match in the National Criminal Database means the person whose DNA was recovered from that glove has no prior arrest, no prior conviction, no prior encounter with the criminal justice system that would have put their profile into the system. This is not a career criminal. This is not someone who has left a trail through multiple jurisdictions. This is someone who, on paper, appears to live an entirely ordinary life. Someone who holds a job. Someone who attends family gatherings. Someone who could drive home an elderly woman on a January evening without raising any alarm. That profile of someone with no criminal history, executing a carefully planned operation with specialized equipment and a controlled sedating substance, has been described by investigators and analysts as defining the specific and dangerous nature of whoever is responsible. Genetic genealogist C.C. Moore told Fox News that the FBI is likely to use Astrea Forensics, the San Francisco-based laboratory that helped crack the Rex Heuermann serial murder case on Long Island, to develop a DNA profile from the rootless hair evidence. The FBI used them for the Gilgo case, Moore said. Astrea Forensics is the lab that helped crack the Gilgo Beach serial killer case, in which Rex Heuermann ultimately pleaded guilty after groundbreaking DNA evidence from rootless hair samples was developed. Moore has stated she is pretty confident that the FBI will utilize Astrea Forensics, describing it as by far the safest option. International Business Times Men's Journal. The situation was complicated by the fact that DNA evidence recovered at the scene was initially sent by the Pima County Sheriff's Department to DNA Labs International, a private laboratory in Florida, rather than directly to the FBI's facility at Quantico, Virginia. The FBI's Assistant Director of Public Affairs, Ben Williamson, addressed this directly, FBI asked to test this DNA 2 months ago with the same technology we've always had, when a local sheriff instead sent it to a private lab. That delay, measured in weeks rather than days, represents time the investigation cannot recover. It represents a gap between what could have been known and what was actually known. It is a gap that matters when the person you are searching for is 84 years old. Fox News. C.C. Moore, who is widely credited with helping pioneer the field of forensic genetic genealogy to solve cold cases, has also advised investigators to consider returning to the scene to collect additional DNA samples, suggesting they re-swab specific areas such as doorknobs where even minute amounts of transferred DNA or saliva could have been left behind. Moore has noted that even mixed or previously inconclusive samples could potentially be revisited using new DNA deconvolution tools and whole genome sequencing to isolate a perpetrator's genetic profile. AOL. More than 100 days after Nancy Guthrie disappeared, investigators confirmed that forensic teams have isolated what they describe as an unknown DNA profile from blood found outside Guthrie's home. That sample does not match anyone currently in the existing database or evidence pool. The investigation now centers on 3 converging lines. The pacemaker signal detection sweeps, which continue in the search corridor, derive from the movement data. The DNA analysis at the federal level, where Astrea Forensics and the genetic genealogy work of C.C. Moore represent the most sophisticated toolkit the investigation has available. And the procurement trail for the sedating compound, which by its very nature requires a source, a supply chain, and a person who knew how to obtain it and how to use it. The Sunday Guardian. Retired FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer has raised the possibility that this case reflects the operational methods of what are sometimes called wrench attack networks, highly organized criminal enterprises that specifically target wealthy individuals for kidnapping and extortion, often recruiting participants through decentralized online channels. Coffindaffer referenced a January 2026 case in Scottsdale in which 2 California teenagers were allegedly recruited online for a cryptocurrency-focused kidnapping attempt, noting it reflected how such networks may operate, though she clarified that incident was not directly tied to the Guthrie case. The planning visible in what was executed at Nancy's home, the knowledge of her routines, the equipment, the sedation, the camera disabling, the vehicle waiting, fits the profile of a coordinated operation rather than a spontaneous one. The Sunday Guardian. Sheriff Chris Nanos, who has maintained throughout the investigation that he believes someone in the public knows something about what happened, recently made a direct appeal. The reward money is still there. It's there for a reason. We know someone out there knows what happened. Call us. Nanos has said detectives remain confident the case can be solved, though no official timeline for a major development has been given. The Sunday Guardian. The Sunday Guardian. The reward in this case stands at $1.2 million. The tip line for the Pima County Sheriff's Department is 520-351-4900. The FBI is accepting information directly as well. If you know anything about the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, those are the numbers that matter. But here's what I want to leave you with, because this case has details that are easy to lose inside the forensic language and the investigative timelines. Nancy Guthrie raised her children largely on her own. She built a life in those Catalina foothills over 5 decades. She tended her garden. She went to church. She had dinner with her daughter on the last evening anyone confirmed seeing her. The device inside her chest, the one that recorded her fear and her transport and her sedation and the breaking of the connection in those 41 minutes, has been running continuously every single day since February 1st. It has not stopped. It is still counting every beat. The internal memory of that device contains a complete record of everything she has experienced since 2:28 in the morning of that date. Every moment of distress, every moment of calm, every physiological event her body has recorded since she was taken. The pacemaker is the most unbiased witness in this case. It cannot be coached or pressured. It cannot be convinced to stay silent. It does not remember things incorrectly. It recorded everything, and it is still recording. KWLD News 13. The DNA at Quantico analyzed by the same laboratory and the same forensic genealogist who helped bring down one of the longest-running serial killers in American history, may produce a name. The signal detection technology sweeping the corridor south of Tucson may produce a location. And the combination of those two threads, the biological data already collected and the biological evidence still being processed, represents the most powerful investigative toolkit ever applied to a missing person case of this kind. This is not a cold case. This is an active federal investigation with forensic capabilities that did not exist a decade ago. The question is whether they will move fast enough. Nancy Guthrie's heart is still beating, and the device inside her chest is still keeping every second of the count.